Hi, everybody. I'm Stewart Gandolf. I'm pleased to meet you today, virtually at least. Kathy Gaughran is my associate. She'll be joining us in just a moment here. Welcome to How to Adjust Your Addiction Treatment Marketing Now and After COVID-19. Very excited to present this. We have a number of clients in the addiction marketplace, and we'll describe that in just a moment. Also, there will be a Q&A section at the end. One final note, please excuse, we are, of course, social distancing. So if you hear my dog barking or the lawnmower guy or something, it's just a sign of the times. So again, I'm Stewart Gandolf, and I'm with Kathy Gaughran. Kathy's going to say hi in just a moment here. I am a co-founder and CEO and actually recently creative director. I actually have a new creative director of Healthcare Success. We are a 30-person marketing agency. We work around the country. We love to speak and share some of our insights with others. Kathy and I've spoken at hundreds of venues over the years. We do a lot of writing as well. I love running our company and working with providers to help them get patients. Kathy, just say hi, a little background.
Yeah, hi. My name is Kathy Gaughran. I've been working with Stewart for over 25 years. We specialize in B2B and B2C businesses and multi-location practices. I've worked with over 5,000 medical groups, hospitals across the country, and lots of experience to share with you today. So we're excited to get started. Thanks for attending.
Great. And then one other of our associates in the addiction marketplace, Jacob, is one of our specialists who works in this space as well, is not joining us today, but in case you ever talk to him, that's Jacob. So one final thing before we get into the meat here. Again, we do work in the addiction space quite heavily. These are just some of the clients we're either working with currently or we've worked with in the past. So the first thing before we get into the meat of the program, I don't think we can possibly do a webinar without acknowledging the environment we are in. We are, as you know, living through a historic pandemic. I've never seen the news change so quickly and so bizarrely as it seems to change over the last couple of months. It's funny, we are speaking to you from our respective home offices. We went virtual at our company about a week or two in advance of everybody because I have a friend of mine who happens to be a neuroscientist who convinced us this was a good idea. So we can see the news change consistently, and it's kind of a crazy time. I want to thank the caregivers that are on the front lines every day. Obviously the people in the emergency rooms, but a lot of people in addiction are still treating patients. They're still living with the fear and anxiety that comes with treating people. So thank you to those of you that are caregivers on the front lines. Obviously work hard to protect yourself and your loved ones if you still can. Most authorities recommend staying home. I always tell people, hey, remember how we act today will be remembered tomorrow. And let's get the world out together. Recent headlines I alluded to a moment ago about how the world is changing so quickly. This headline came in yesterday. U.S. coronavirus cases surpass 1 million. Death toll is greater than U.S. losses in Vietnam War. We have about 20 states set to reopen as we get to the million case mark, and some other of these very discouraging headlines that we've all been enduring lately. As you know, of course, people have changed their lives around this. It's fun. This is just some stats I shared at a recent webinar, but how quickly people went from denying and really not even understanding there was anything to essentially everybody started working from home within a matter of weeks. And today, even as we talk about opening up, I study and follow this a lot as CEO of the company. It's my job to know what's happening out there in the world, of course, and to guide our clients and our employees. And what's interesting is even the states that are opening up, it's definitely not rushing back to normal. We are in a pandemic, and even when we open up, for good or bad, that doesn't mean the crowds are going to race back and everything's going to be back to normal. We're going to be in a COVID hangover for quite some time, unfortunately. The consumer behavior has changed a lot in recent weeks. Up to 70% of people say they're delaying major purchases. We are seeing, of course, that people are staying home a lot, right? And this is 95% of people are admitting they're spending a lot more time with in-home media, watching the news, spending time with their family, watching Netflix, broadcast. Now, a couple of things that we're going to talk about later. Broadcast TV is up, as well as streaming is at record levels. more time on social media, of course, and more time listening to music streamed as well. And I'll expand upon some of those issues because those do provide us some opportunities going through this. Now, one of the things that, as Kathy and I were talking about this and talking to our team who are on the ground with the clients, not literally on the ground, but talking with our clients every day. Kathy is and Jacob are both addiction specialists. So they're talking to clients and potential clients constantly. And one of the things we talked about as we began planning this meeting was, obviously we're seeing the news. Liquor stores are seeing spikes in sales. And we saw some predictable headlines recently. Substance abuse is going to skyrocket during this pandemic. Or, these were all conjecture just a few weeks ago. And what we're seeing now is, in fact, that it's true. And you probably are experiencing this at your addiction center as well. I thought this was a really interesting slide as I prepared for this meeting. I went to Google Trends, and this is a relative scale of the interest in these topics over the past 12 months. And so we have addiction treatment, alcohol rehab, and while there have been some surges and lulls in the interest in these topics in recent weeks, you can look at it on an annual basis and it's pretty steady. And as you'd expect, right at the beginning of the pandemic, it dipped a little bit, and then it sort of flattened out almost to median. And so you can see the interest in this on the scale of 0 to 100. Interest in these kind of bounces around 20, 25 consistently. But check out alcohol sales, buying alcohol. The searches for buying alcohol, surprise, peaked at the holidays, but all of a sudden, at the beginning of COVID, a dramatic rise in the interest in buying alcohol. And we saw that in retailers as well. So I just thought that was an interesting context of, we're trying to help people, and you can see that stress is playing itself out in a lot of ways. So I want to share some sites because I know we have a lot of larger centers on the call today. We have some smaller ones. Everybody has their own experience. What we often joke is if you know one addiction treatment center, you know one addiction treatment center, right? You can't say they apply to everybody. So in today's call, I thought what we would do is share some of the insights we've gleaned by talking to our clients, to addiction centers that are not our clients, because we are certainly heavy in the industry. And so some of this will ring true for you. Some of this may be surprising for you. And actually, Kathy, I'm going to perhaps let you jump in on some of this stuff. And from your experience of talking to people, the fact is that high stress and the isolation are not just conjecture. They really are leading to more substance abuse and relapses. Kathy, do you have some comments on that?
Well, yeah. In addiction and all of the mayhem that happens, addiction is always acute, and it's always a very emotional transition in a person's life. The isolation is what's concerned me, both personally and professionally. And I've placed a lot of loved ones in centers throughout the country, and it's difficult to get them to the position of making a decision that's in their best interest. Obviously, you know that. The isolation is something that they're given sort of a playground right now. The isolation is every addict's playground. So once things start getting a little bit closer to remaining, getting back to normal, we're going to see a burgeoning demand of people that are needing to deal with what's been happening over the past couple of months. So it's going to change as we change and as doors open.
Kathy, have any comments on this particular line?
Yeah, I think too, we've got this. I've been very deep in the recovery community for 20 years. And it's interesting with the observations of behavior and how people are spending their time. We know that addiction isn't always just directed to usage. There are other behaviors that we can see as someone's going to start heading down the path of relapse. And the isolation and patterns of behavior are really identifying factors for the influencers and loved ones of the addicts that are trying to work with them to get recovery.
Yep. And
social distancing also is just really difficult. It's, AA meetings, all of the programs that are available, bridging that gap between going to meetings for a newcomer or somebody who's in the throes of a potential relapse. That community, that sense of community as a part of the triangle is so critical to long-term sobriety. And if they can't get to people and they're unwilling to do so remotely, that creates another layer of problems. So.
Very good. And what we're finding with our clients on the social distancing, some of our clients are facing capacity issues because on the residential side, they can't provide care to as many people. One of the things we're seeing is that some of the centers that we work with and talk to are feeling tremendous economic stress from this pandemic. What's interesting is, and it really depends a lot on the style of the business that we talk to, but others are holding steady. I don't know of anybody who's, getting tremendous gains from it, but certainly some are feeling the pain more than others.
One of the big things I'm noticing, Stewart, is some of the centers who draw from a national reach are significantly impacted because people aren't wanting to fly. So that I've noticed that more in the centers that have a larger draw due to specialty IOP programs or residential programs that other centers don't offer. So if you've got a unique offering and you do draw from areas that are not drivable, that's usually the biggest hit that I've been seeing in certain areas, certain states.
Very good, very important. We talked earlier about 70% of people are putting off big expenses. So not surprisingly, we're finding that our centers are reporting back to us that money is always an issue, but it's particularly an issue in a pandemic. I'll speak to this one. What's interesting is a lot of the campaigns we're running and our clients are running continue to get a lot of interest. But what's interesting is some of them continue to get a fair amount of inquiries and others not so much. So it really depends. Again, each center is a little different. Each marketplace is a little different. And so this is where the added value of hopefully you're working with a marketing partner that really watches those campaigns. We're always, for our company, we're always constantly adjusting our digital buys and our entire marketing plan. But right now in particular, it requires real stewardship to make sure we're investing wisely because it's not the same across the board. Kathy, you can also speak to this one, I think.
Yes, patients and influencers are worried about COVID, just exposure. I know a number of centers have COVID wings in them that are dedicated centers, so they are accepting patients and then putting them in a quarantine area. But any sort of exposure, just doubles down or gives them another reason to delay treatment. So it's just adding to their arsenal of excuses to not go down the path of sobriety. We want to remove this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we just want to be able to remove those. That's one of the big challenges with getting addicts that are, getting ready to get into treatment is all of the barriers that they can put in front of them. And as Stewart calls them, spike strips. And that's another one, is just having another reason to not admit.
And then of course, telemedicine is the rage. And if you follow our blog, you'll note that we've just wrote an article about not just the implementation, which everybody's talking about, but the marketing potential by having telemedicine, by creating new offers, new ways of doing business. So it's much bigger than just a tactical way of seeing patients. It's opening up all new opportunities. Kathy, any additional comments on that one?
Again, I think as part of our sobriety triangle and all of the elements that we know really contributes to long-term sobriety, the community is so critical. It's so vital. And some people are accustomed to and comfortable having conversations remotely. Others just aren't. And this has a lot to do with the patient. But I know most centers are offering telemedicine options for the therapy side or just consulting side. But this is very different than being able to be in a residential relationship with these people. So it's a new normal. It's a very different world.
So here's the big question of the day. In light of COVID-19, should I just freeze everything? And some of you may already be frozen, right? Should we stay frozen? What should we be doing? And it's a constant uncertainty. And what should we do? And the answer that we would argue, no, freezing almost never makes sense. But it may make sense to pause your advertising. And just as a reminder here, because we have executives and therapists and clinicians and marketers. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, in marketing class 101, they teach the 4 P's of marketing. Some people expand it to 7. We use the 7P model: price, product, place, promotion, positioning, packaging, and people. And if you look at it, when we talk about advertising, just as a reminder to those of you and even people that are in marketing, that advertising is a piece of one of the P's. So we just got through talking about telemedicine, right? So telemedicine can be actually a whole new product. Telemedicine is a new place, right? It's virtual. Telemedicine may have pricing implication. It may be part of how you package your services, how you position yourself, The people part, by the way, is your team. So just think about that. All those things have nothing to do with promotion. So think about your marketing more broadly. This context of price, place, product, people, positioning, packaging, promotion. And oh, by the way, that last P, promotion, includes advertising and PR. That's usually the last one we think about. So it's really critical. I urge you, as you start thinking about your business, to think more broadly and come back to the basics, because it is a new era. We have new products available, particularly telemedicine, a new way of delivering our product. So I would argue, let's pretend for a moment that you're in a position where you need to, for whatever reason, freeze the advertising. And we'll talk about some advertising opportunities in just a few minutes. So I would argue at this stage to take the opportunity to invest in the long term, right? It's funny, I just got off the phone with somebody talking about our business, and he was talking about our website. And what's interesting is we're in the process, just like we recommend to our clients, periodically we go through and update our website in a substantial way. We've grown tremendously over the years, and our website really doesn't reflect who we are today. It reflects who we were a few years ago. So we're practicing what we preach. We're taking the opportunity to go back and look at our marketing plan for our own business as well as our clients and make some changes. And this is really the spirit of this. So I would argue that your job is to at least plan for the future and prepare, because COVID will, as horrible as it is, will eventually recede. Now the speed of that, I'm trying to think of the right word, but the speed of that recovery, both health-wise and economically, may take longer than we all wish, but I would start planning on this now. And there are a lot of things you can do, even if you're not advertising. So marketing planning, great thing to do now. Brand strategy. If you've ever thought, a lot of people have been thinking about their brand, who are we? Coincidentally, Kathy and I are talking to a new potential client in the addiction space later today. And one of the things that we're looking at with them is what's their brand strategy? And they have a brand that goes back to their founder many years ago. So we're going to look at what's their brand strategy. Is it the right one or the wrong one? Take a look at your creative work. Again, websites or videos or content. Social media assets. What can we do to strengthen that? What can we do to strengthen it for a large center? What about our own employee communications? It's funny with our company, we now, with this pandemic, every Friday afternoon at 3:30, we meet at all hands on deck to keep us connected. It's really, really important. SEO is by nature long-term. It's a natural place to invest your dollars. So if you're in an organization that has X amount of dollars to invest a year, then one option would be, if you're pausing, rather than just let that money go back, to reinvest it in a better long-term SEO strategy. And of course, organic. So notice that's a lot of marketing, and there wasn't a dime being spent on advertising. Mm-hmm. Some ideas, preparing for this meeting as well, I spoke with our creative director, who's awesome, by the way, Dana, and we both agreed on this. And number one, I think it's really critical that we acknowledge the situation that we're in wherever possible, right? It's just like we started the webinar. You can't ignore the elephant in the room, COVID. So it's important to do that. Whatever your creative is, whether you're advertising or just updating your website or social media, anything that's current, be transparent. Kathy and I, we have worked together on a large client in the long-term care industry. As you imagine, there's lots of trouble there right now. How do we be transparent about what we're doing to protect patients? And that's really, really important. There's ads that have scenes of large crowds. Now this is hard because there's a lot of hugs in the addiction treatment market, but things like that may look awkward or out of touch right now. So I'm not saying change every picture on your website, take out all the group therapy sections, but just recognize, especially with advertising, some things just look really, really odd and out of touch. Another thing that's important is to be careful of looking exploitative, even because it's very easy to do that, even if it's not your intention. Make sure that you don't have any unintended messages, like, oh, I'm dying to see you, or, acts like a computer virus. And then finally, and this is a big deal, try to have empathy. People are grieving, not just in your marketing, but in your human relationships. It's funny, I watch my own behavior, my clients' behavior, our employee behaviors. Some people just get very quiet, some people cry, some people scream at others, right? People grieve in different ways. Kathy, any comments on this in terms of your experience on the creative direction?
Yeah, I think the other thing to keep in mind is that all of the ways that COVID is impacting people. It's, I think somebody asked the other day, do you know anyone who has, I don't know anyone who has COVID, I know one, but how many people do you know whose lives have been impacted by COVID? And it's everybody. So people are being impacted financially, personally, from a health perspective. I know I am social distancing from my mother, who was just put in a board and care, which is horrific. So a lot of people are dealing with this in a variety of ways that doesn't have directly to do with COVID virus. So I know that that goes without saying, but it's deep and fractured. So just be sensitive and aware that they're struggling with issues that are a result of everything that's happened around COVID.
Very good. One of the things that we also argue, and this is I did a webinar recently, I tried to include this because it's a fun analogy. We're in healthcare, and so that doesn't mean everybody has to be an ER doctor or nurse or critical care. We're all in healthcare, and so what's interesting is there's still a lot of miscommunication and misinformation about COVID. And my only point here is before people finally started taking social distancing seriously, the U.S. Surgeon General, who has access to every possible government communications tool, ended up going to Kylie Jenner because they're missing the millennial crowd entirely with all this stuff on the news. They're not consuming media in the same way. And so I just think it's amazing that, we bypassed the CDC and, everybody else, and we went to Kylie Jenner, and she put out a Instagram post video to her 4 million followers. So my only argument here is that all of us in healthcare, I would argue, not only can we do this from a business standpoint of getting the word out about COVID in an ethical way, but think about it from addiction. So your center, without spending a dime, can promote social distancing, or obviously pointing towards sections. You don't want to get into practicing medicine, but help them who may think they may have the virus, or talk about addiction, talk about things like, for example, don't let the fear of getting the virus, if you need detox, keep you from taking action, right? There's very serious medical issues. Right now, the emergency rooms are empty. People are with heart attacks are staying home because they're afraid to get COVID. So to the extent that you can, I would just argue organic social media you might as well. It's a good time to get the word out, to help build your reputation. It doesn't cost you anything. So again, we're talking here, if you're not advertising, you don't have to sit flat-footed.
One other thing I want to mention on the Kylie Jenner slide is that there's a large percentage of our population in our millennial demographic that turn to her for their news. She is a very legitimate news source to a large population of people. So we need to not underestimate our influencers. One of the things I do love in addiction with these influencers is they're helping minimize the shame of addiction, which I, in my lifetime, would love to see minimized. It really prohibits a lot of people from getting the treatment that they need. So there's definitely a benefit with these younger folks that are having such an influence on a large part of our population, and we want to leverage that. There's some great articles on leveraging influencers, and you've probably got a handful in your practice. With the anonymity associated with treatment, there will be a huge population of people that don't want to be visible, but there are people who will. And the people who will can definitely help influence people to come out of the closet, stop their isolation, and take this as a more mainstream treatment option for themselves and their loved ones. So I'm liking that influencer contribution to our message.
Very good. So I mentioned earlier, so I just talked about a number of things you can do without spending a cent in terms of advertising. But I didn't want to go so far as to say advertising never makes sense, because that would be an incorrect overstatement. So what's interesting is some of our clients are actually seeing this in their marketplace. Some of the larger addiction treatment centers are actually doubling down. They're actually advertising more right now. Why? Well, because first of all, a lot of people are fleeing the marketplace, right? And so most people are freezing. So the more aggressive, better funded centers, some of them are, and this includes both nonprofits and for-profits, are advertising more. Also, if there was a time to build yourself as a thought leader, again, by taking a far forward stance, remember I said earlier, you'll be remembered for a long time after this for what you do and don't do. So some centers are economically able to position themselves as a community thought leader. Again, that's the time to do it. If you're interested in building your brand for the long term and you feel like you can, like I said a moment ago, capitalize on your competitor's absence and have a reasonable marketing budget, right? If you have a month-to-month budget and you're constantly worried about budget and you know, your census is way down and you just can't do it, you can't do it. So that's my point is you probably shouldn't do it. If you can only invest, first of all, if you just you don't have it. Two, some businesses really only want to advertise direct response style, which is, you know, the majority of our clients do a high portion of that. They want to bring $1, they want to bring back 4, right? So if that's what you're looking for today, this probably isn't the right time for you. There certainly can get some direct response, but again, this is more about brand building and market share and thought leadership today, as opposed to direct response.
Right, and a lot about what they're, what we want to focus on is people are watching what you do as much as what you say. So a lot of the things that Stewart has outlined in terms of graphics and content and communication tactics and not being too self-promotional are all particularly important right now, because it's how you're communicating with them, and you know, they're watching your behavior, how you're going to have their back, or what you do with COVID and how you handle the patients you have in treatment now, what you're doing for your IOP programs. So there's observation if there's not admits currently.
Yeah. And then obviously if you're closed, it's probably not the ideal time. Now let's talk about more specifically. Let's say that Google Ads, paid search, digital advertising. I don't have time today to go through every tactic we do, right? We do pretty much everything digitally you can imagine, online and offline. But I want to talk about specifically Google paid search, which is the majority of a lot of addiction center budgets. So first of all, for our clients that are still in market, which we have a fair number, most of them are in market to some degree. First of all, I would say that, again, if you're doing it in-house, great. If you're using an agency, just make sure that your team is really closely monitoring accounts. We see tremendous variation by business. We see variation within the accounts. Some campaigns get hot, some get cold. So it's really important more than ever to actively manage those programs. What's interesting is a lot of the addiction-based inquiries are high. So we're seeing fair numbers for a lot of businesses where the clicks, the searches are still happening. It's just their inquiries are down. And that makes sense intuitively if you think about it. You're stuck at home, you're worried, you feel like you need to get help, you find somebody good, but maybe I don't feel comfortable going in, so we don't actually call. Now, one of the things that we do a lot with our clients when we get these kind of situations is to do retargeting, particularly through Facebook and Instagram, so that you can stay in front of that patient, even if they don't inquire, even if they don't give you your name or email address. You can at least stay in touch with them that way. So interestingly enough, Kathy thought this was fun, we included this. As you might expect, some are doing really well and increase. So addiction, as I mentioned, in some cases actually is doing better for leads. Primary care and urgent care also, as you might expect, are doing well. Some are holding strong, and then some, of course, are closed, right? So that's not possible. Terms like preventative care, boosting immune system, and we may start seeing this kind of get into the addiction community as well. I can imagine easily people start looking for natural solutions for addiction care, those kinds of things.
One of the things, Stewart, I wanted to be sure to mention is that COVID has been reported to hit addicts harder because of their compromised healthcare and neglect. So there are a lot of secondary issues that addicts tend to develop as a result of their disease that COVID is going after. So there's also a heightened risk factor for addicts that are untreated as well.
That's great, Kathy. Good point. I didn't know that. I hadn't thought of that, so that's good to know.
Yeah.
See, Kathy's on the ground every day with the stuff. So good insight. And then finally, we've already seen this a little bit, decreases in cost per click, especially as competitors continue to flee the market. So here's our ads, or I'm sorry, our recommendations. I told you what to do. Now here's some more specific recommendations. First of all, broadly speaking, your brand-based keywords, if somebody's looking for you, you've got to make sure they can find you. and especially really action-based, lower in the funnel kinds of terms. I
Right.
don't want to advertise currently for educational terms like, you know, am I an alcoholic? I'm looking for, if I have a tight budget and not getting much calls or many calls, I'd rather advertise for, you know, addiction treatment center near me, or, you know, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Memphis addiction, something like that. So I would recommend that if you have to be wholesome budget, I would focus on the more action-based, lower funnel terms. Be sure whoever's doing your program is focusing that way. Make sure the ads read appropriately for the new reality. It's really easy for something to sound out of context, and you know, digital advertising is hard. Our team has, you know, dozens of campaigns running, millions of different ads running all the time. Artificial intelligence in our programs as well, but it's a lot of work. And so make sure your team, even though it's hard, goes through and looks at all those campaigns with fresh eyes to make sure there's nothing out of place for the new reality. It's easy to happen. Closely, again, monitor the searches and results. Be prepared to pivot. Landing pages, you know, we've adjusted our landing pages to, even though we don't typically want to say anything on a landing page, as you may know, is designed to get a conversion. We don't want to talk about anything else, but in this case, COVID is important. And so even on a landing page, it's not just the website, we probably want to mention that we're safe. Consider opportunities like advertising for a telemedicine product. Interestingly enough, again, display advertising, we talk about mostly paid search, but display, native advertising on Yahoo, YouTube. You know, people are spending a lot of time online, not necessarily actively searching. So those could be some opportunities. And then also just keep in mind that I haven't seen any more details on this beyond the government bailout. Google and Facebook are both pledging to, at some point, offer some credits to some of the small businesses. So maybe you may or may not be able to apply for those. If you've ever been to our seminar or seen us speak before, you would know that we love Google and love paid social. Organic social is great, paid social takes it to the bank. So we have tons of experience with this, and if you're doing paid social, and when we say Facebook, we're Facebook, that's the leading platform for sure. Everybody else is everybody else. Again, I mentioned earlier, make sure your ads are relevant and appropriately emotional, particularly for addiction. You can consider, if you're still open, Facebook Live or virtual events. That has tremendous. Live is really favored in the algorithm by Facebook, so you can look at that. Again, telehealth. One of the great things that is about Facebook compared to like paid search is the whole community feel. So some of your community actions or your everyday heroes can be great. One of the things that my social media manager insisted that I talk about is messenger ads. So that's essentially kind of like a chatbot, messenger ads. And I'll share with you an example. This is for one of our clients where we are online with a chatbot or messenger option. It appears as though it's somebody who's responding to them, but it's actually a sequence of responses based upon, you set the responses based upon what the questions are, and we are getting tremendous lead generation through this program. So this is something we're doing for our clients.
Yeah, thank you, sir. One of the things I wanted to mention about this too, in social media specifically, is that a lot of addicts in isolation are trolling social media. So this is really a great place to catch people and start to form that bond and that relationship. They're not talking to people, they're not posting, but they're looking. It's a way of staying connected while they're unconnected.
Yep. We're going to be taking questions in just a few moments here, or probably 4 or 5 minutes. So if you have questions, keep that in mind. But I want to talk some more about a couple of other issues before we get to the Q&A. Another thing that's cool about this method is we're seeing tons of social engagement as well. So this is just a fun new tactic. Obviously, addiction marketing, there's a million tactics we employ for our clients, and you probably do for yourself. But this is just a fun time one. Earlier on the digital side, that whole, for those of you that aren't familiar with OTT, over the top, connected TV, they're used kind of interchangeably these days. I would usually use the term CTV. OTTs for device, CTV is the methodology. But at any rate, connected TV meaning, for example, advertising on Hulu. And so depending on how sophisticated you are on this, programmatic buying with advertising now online, this is what's called real-time bidding. So we can bid with thematic buys for digital radio, on Google Display Network, on content sites like the New York Times and USA Today and places like that, ESPN. And you can also advertise even with your scoring or with your buy OTT, running videos on Hulu as though are a regular commercial with a local TV station. So these are the kinds of things that are happening. This just happens to be I was preparing for this, pulled a ComScore website. This stuff is updated constantly, but the OTT, CTV marketplace is booming. Again, people are at home, they're streaming. This is just an example of how much they're listening to radio or digital radio. Interestingly enough, as people are less time in the car, in-home streaming is taking over, right? So people, again, are consuming content at a much higher rate. I think this is fun. I shared this just because how good iHeartRadio has become. iHeartRadio, right about when this began, targeted me with, hey, here's your work from home playlist. And bizarrely, I think I'm being really super targeted because most of up there, not the country, but most of the stuff they targeted me with, I like. So iHeartRadio is doing a pretty good job there, taking advantage of the fact they know people are home, more available to listen and stream. So before we wrap up, I want to talk about traditional advertising. So again, usually we do the streaming radio and TV, streaming TV as our favorite opportunity. So regular television and streaming radio are big ones. Billboards when people aren't driving, no. And print, as you know, has been in a long, slow death spiral for a long time. So we would put that in the not so much category, and generally speaking. Obviously, every market's different. Here's some cool opportunities though. Viewership and listenership are way, way up. Meanwhile, advertisers are fleeing the marketplace, right? We have the canceled Olympics, fewer political ads. So what do you think that means to the media rates, right? You've got tremendous audiences, but nobody's buying. So the deal of a lifetime, if it makes sense for you to advertise, is right about now. So first of all, again, if you do an external advertising, it would be the time to create ads that convey the positive messaging, talk about things like community. But I want to underscore that I would have the media outlets partner with you. So if you have an agency, make sure that their media buyer is negotiating on your behalf. Don't be afraid to ask for more. This is a challenging marketplace. This is especially true if you have a long relationship. Our media buyer is fantastic at this. So for example, in Chicago, one of our clients in the addiction space, we were able to negotiate 80 free community-oriented radio spots. That's pretty amazing to include into the mix. And the same buyer in Texas for another one of our clients, when we asked to move out of radio and into budget or into TV, our radio rep literally provided us 180 free spots across 3 locations, no strings attached, as a measure of long-term goodwill. So again, advertising does not make sense for everybody, but we do have some larger, more sophisticated addiction treatment centers on the webcast today. So if you're in that category, you have budget, and you're interested in the long term, there are definitely some opportunities there. So again, I'm Stewart Gandolf, I'm CEO, and this is my contact info. More importantly, Kathy is one of our addiction specialists. This is Kathy's information. Kyle, do we have any questions from our audience today?
If you do have any questions, please feel free to go down to the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and go ahead and type any of your questions in for either Stewart or Kathy or both of them. We'll wait for those.
All right, excellent. So I had one question earlier that I'll describe in a minute here, so we'll wait for that to see if there's any additional responses before I go there. Kathy, meanwhile, this is your world. What are any final thoughts from your standpoint? I mean, you live in this world every day with your clients. Tell me some extra thoughts you might have.
Well, just that the competitive landscape is changing. Obviously, a lot of centers are consolidating either under larger groups or with other groups, and that makes a significant change to how they're being viewed in the patient population and the influencer population. So there are bigger national groups that are starting to diversify and target both traditional and digital. And very aggressive. So it's important that you protect your flanks, develop a plan and a strategy make sure you understand your goals and objectives. And in the interim, there's just a lot that we can do in terms of communication. We need to really demonstrate your brand to the population now by how you act, how you behave, what you offer. I love incorporation of some of the widely accessible apps, the sobriety counter, AA meeting finder. There's a lot of good programs that people are using right now because of the isolation that you can embed on your site and increase traffic. So just utilize all the resources you can. Remind yourself that you're demonstrating behavior right now. So as I said earlier, it's as much what you do as it is what you say, and recognizing that they're still out there. And this is a really tough time for addicts in isolation, as well as their family members who are watching this. And it's yet one more reason not to start treatment.
Very good. So we have two questions before we wrap up here. Number one was what somebody asked about the action-based keyword terms. So let me rephrase that again to help clarify that. So when we're doing a paid search campaign, the strategy behind there, our team typically does, hundreds or thousands of keywords depending on what the campaign is and what we're trying to achieve. But what we often talk about there's different kinds of terms that are more research-based or top of the funnel. So if you're familiar with this idea of the sales funnel is when people essentially are looking at or considering they're kind of interested in an addiction treatment, or maybe it's a influencer or a parent or a loved one who's beginning to look around. They're searching terms like, for example, symptoms of alcoholism or am I an alcoholic? Those are research-based terms. Maybe, how many drinks a day does an alcoholic have? Well, that could be an alcoholic that's, wondering about themselves, or they might just be a kid in a school looking up, doing a paper on alcoholism. It doesn't mean they're necessarily very qualified. So that doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad term to search for, but usually that would be a lower priority term. You would pay less for it. Maybe you're looking to engage people for the longer term play. Maybe keywords like that, you may drive them to content on your website, like a blog. So research-based phrases are longer term. They're at the very top of the funnel. The more action-based keywords are, addiction treatment center near me, or drug rehab open today, detox open now. Those would be at the very bottom of the funnel, where people are looking for solutions to help you right now. Another question just came in. Interesting question. Should we be competing on price of treatment or the service offering during this crisis? Obviously, I haven't met you yet, so it's hard to give you specific advice, but I would tell you my instinct, which is that the price is really tough because you're killing your margins and it's hard to ever go back, right? I think the idea, at least with me, starting with no background information on the situation, I would want to figure out how can I change the product. Again, I mentioned earlier, telemedicine, telehealth is a new offering. I would be really excited with trying that. So for example, I'm making this up as we're talking here, but the direct response guy and me, we could test doing a free consultation by telehealth, or a low cost, maybe a flat fee, $39 telehealth consultation, some low barrier to entry. And that way you're not giving up, you're not discounting your service, but you're discounting a new offer. So that's kind of a cool idea. Kathy, any other ideas on that particular question?
Yeah, and it also depends. Competition is something you want to obviously factor into that as well. There's a lot of free options, but it's, people buy based on emotion. So we definitely need to make sure we're threading in an emotional reason to not detox at home and to not look at price as your only option, because it's really the programming that should be more important to your sobriety, not pricing, but pricing is obviously going to be a factor. So one other comment I wanted to make on Stewart's earlier keyword phrase is how to detox at home is kind of an interesting way to walk that fence between a research term and a buying term. Talking about the dangers of home detox is also something that is kind of a side door. I guess it's a window in to somebody who's looking for help, but really starting at the beginning phases of trying to do it themselves. So we know a lot of people in treatment are relapsers, they're retreads. When we're looking to reach out to people who are first timers, that's usually where they start, is trying to do it on their own. So I think that's a good keyword grouping to consider or factor into your strategy.
Okay, we have another question. We actually have two other questions. Let's see, this one is there any way to take advantage of telemedicine if the facility is strictly inpatient? You know, it's a good question. I would say, again, maybe the way to do it is less as a way of treating and more as a gateway into the business. We often talk about gateways into the business. So using telemedicine as a first step, you know, so for example, you could do a telemedicine consultation of, you know, is your addiction serious enough that it requires inpatient? You know, find out. We'll give you an objective assessment. So that would be one way of doing it. So again, if you're not offering like intensive outpatient or some other offerings, there's almost always an idea there. You know, the key is that with this new technology and this new day, there's opportunities if you're innovative by nature. And I just love that kind of stuff. So I would experiment, but that was just an idea for you there. Final question is that I can see here is, are you guys consultants? And the answer to that is, well, yes and no, not really, but yes, let me explain what we mean. We're an agency, so we're a full service agency. And we don't do consulting solely, but the way we typically work with our clients is most of our clients, we recommend, instead of just racing the marketing, we start off with, Kathy and I call it a patient history, exam, diagnosis, and treatment plan. So in most cases, we start off with more of a consulting engagement, but it's not just consulting for the sake of consulting. What we do is do a deep dive into the business, look at who you are, how you practice, what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve, what the competition is, special, what kind of product offering do you have, how many locations, what's the competition doing, all those kinds of things. And then Kathy and Jacob typically lead this process for our team, and then they come back and work with you to create a plan, get internal buy-off and internal approvals, and really work with you to come up with the right assessment. And you typically will find things that you're doing really well, great. We'll find things that could be better, great. And then essentially with our clients, we usually work with them to create a roadmap or blueprint, and that's what I said, or plan, if you will, for the following year or two or three. And then from there, if you're interested in that sort of thing, most of our clients that do that process they don't just want the consulting, they're hoping we'll help them, right? They want a hand. And so we work with clients in lots of different ways. If you're interested, talk to Jacob, talk to Kathy about that. But the way we work with that in that case is we typically will be essentially, in some cases, an outsourced marketing department where we have the SEO guy, the paid social person, the paid team, the digital team, the programming team, the buying team, the media, the strategists, the writers, the artists, all that's in one place. And so, you know, oftentimes for the cost of about one full-time salary, you can have access to about 10. So that's how we work. If you're interested, Kathy or Jacob can tell you more about that. Okay, well, I've enjoyed working with you guys today. You have our contact information. If there's anything we can help you with, we would be pleased to do so. In any event, hope we get to meet you in the world. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Take care.